So, Rodney, your unique shade of purple this morning.
Dude, it's a stressful day. I look, you have told me many times that the market doesn't care about me, right? That it's like
Just not.
omniscient to me. That's not true. The market hates me, Gabe. That's just the way. Yeah. So you're
Is
not
this
going to
because
convince me any different.
you didn't hold corn till delivery and now you're kicking yourself? Like I don't.
So I just like long story short, we had a bunch of call options bought that were doing really well, and Monday was good, and what I missed sight of that you would have known blindfolded is that suddenly my delta was like 100,
One.
right? Yeah, or one. And it just the market just tanked since then.
All
It
right.
puts you
Well, we should pick on you at the end about that and find out
for
more
sure. Yeah.
about what's going on there. But so we got Yasha with us today. Hi, Yasha.
Hey,
Hi,
Asha.
pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
So Yasha and so Yasha is CTO over at a company called EarthAcre, and so occasionally they call me up and we talk about stuff that they do. But EarthAcre does this like really innovative way of measuring biodiversity, which is something I feel like I've heard about literally for 20 years, and is incredibly difficult to find some two people to give you the same answer on what it means. And so Earthacre has a very reasonable answer to that question, because they kind of changed how they answer it.
Hmm.
So we definitely should talk about that. But Yasha's CTO there, he's got like a extensive entrepreneurship background as well as he likes to refer to, some corporate America thrown in. Um, yeah, and so Ronnie, you've never met Yasha.
I have not. No.
All right,
Heard a lot
Yasha.
about you.
Oh,
Yeah.
I hope good things.
All good things. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, Ronnie and I were talking, and we're like, we've talked to too many grain people lately. Who's somebody who'd be fun to talk to that's not? And so that you were my reflexive response. It's like shit,
Let's
Yasha.
do it.
He's
I'm
always
excited.
entertaining. So welcome, Yasha.
Yeah.
Thanks. Really exciting to chat.
So Yasha, can you talk a little bit more about exactly, I guess, what you're doing today? That yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So EarthAcre is a company that was started about 3 years ago, at the beginning of the pandemic. I guess maybe it was more than three. The years start blurring together. With the pandemic. But at the beginning of the pandemic, myself and my co-founder were found ourselves asking a question of why is there massive sell-off of indigenous land happening? My co-founder is from Kenya, so he was seeing this a lot around the areas he grew up in, and whether we could do something about it, right? And the answer was, I would say, fairly simplistic. A lot of indigenous practices can no longer support the livelihoods, just economically. So folks out there are using things like ecotourism and other means to add to their income in order to make it sustainable to live in these lands. And so when the tourism went away during COVID, folks started selling land, and we thought that we could help. And that's sort of how the idea of Faker came to be. At first, it was in partnership with some folks who were looking at just donation type raising money, just hold us over. But we thought there's got to be a way for people to understand how valuable the remaining nature on our planet is, right? And that's how we got there. So nowadays, EarthAcre works across a number of projects in Kenya and starting to expand outwards. These projects are both restoration and stewardship or sustaining current ecosystems, right? And we're finding and looking at various financial mechanisms to get folks paid for the stewardship that they're doing. And I think the biggest differentiator between what we do and what's been done before is that instead of working with a single large landowner, we work in really complicated community-based structures, which provide much better outcomes for nature and also for livelihoods on the ground. So it's a really powerful model that leads to much better outcomes for ecosystems.
Yeah, one of the things that I've learned from you guys, or that I understand slightly better, but certainly by no means deeply understand, is like land ownership in Africa is like very different than traditional Western land ownership structures. And so, Yasha very briefly just said, "Oh, community-owned lands," which makes it sound like it's the rec center or something. Right? Like that's what I hear. And so, but it's a totally different ownership structure. And so I think I'm going to ask Yasha to go into it a little bit more because I just think it's like fascinating to better understand. And it's also one of the reasons why like all those different species and different types of things still persist is like those structures, kind of were built. They hadn't been disturbed until far more recently, where colonialism hadn't completely penetrated. So I think it's a really different type of land stewardship than we think about. I would say on the Western side, like because it's not just. Well, I'll ask Yasha to explain a little bit more, but it's a really different way of land ownership like that as a concept. But it's not like a hippie, hey man, you can't own that thing. I think they very much feel ownership over the land. So, Yasha, yeah, can you just, you know,
Yeah, yeah, very good question. Because I rotate in these circles and talk about community ownership. I forget how different it is really until like a family member asks, and then they're confused. So thanks for asking the question. Absolutely. So in a lot of rural land in Africa, right? The ownership can be passed down through ancestral rights. It could be a handshake between two people. It could be just a village elder who knows who owns this from here to the next landmark over, right? Um, and the governments across Africa, and not just in Africa, by the way, we're talking about just rural lands in a lot of different places in the world. Um, the governments don't quite participate in the ownership and title giving
so there's not a
that
lot of
we're
title
so
searches
used
when
to.
you're buying.
Yeah, that we're so used to over here, right? So, for example, when we go out and need to ensure ownership of land, right? It's usually a long process. We're working together with community elders, bringing in local surveyors. There's no internet involved. At best, you can go to a land register's office, request like a map index sheet, and then start going from there. And then you get into mutexes, and we can go down the rabbit hole into like just this bit of it. But the really interesting thing about it is that there is a source of truth in a lot of these places, especially in places where folks want to stay, folks want to continue living, right? We talk to young and old folks who all want to follow their cultural traditions. We obviously talk to folks who want to leave, but I think there is this I guess myth to some extent that everyone just wants to get away and get to urban areas as quickly as possible. And I think that is a myth that's usually based on financial viability of being able to live and provide for a family in those areas. So and then, Gabe, if you don't mind, to take that second point of how does that affect the outcomes? How does that affect the ecosystem outcomes? Because you kind of touched on it. I can either pass it to you and we can come back to that, or I can just very briefly say that very frequently when we have a name for something, we have a use for something, we care about that thing much more, right? So to me, a guy living in the United States, I walk outside, I point at a tree, say that's a tree. I point at a bush, say it's a bush. Flower, that's about the extent of my understanding of my ecosystem around me. Maybe I can identify an oak versus another type of tree, but that's, honestly at best, right? When I'm walking around with folks around these areas, and they're showing me, okay, this bush, when the cow is having problem calving, we make a brew for the cow. When someone is having seizures, we make a brew out of this tree. We use the bark for this. We use there is a part of the livelihood that revolves around using the ecosystem around them and caring about that ecosystem around them, right? And therefore, the outcomes to stewarding that land is much better because they care about not just one or two species, but about the ecosystem health as a whole.
Rodney, I've been struck over the couple years that I've talked to the folks at EarthAcre about how similar I think the struggle is to like rural America as it is to these communal lands in Africa, right? It's the
Yeah.
same problem, right? Like you're looking for to bring wealth, like the family grows, like there's not enough room to sustain them in that spot. Who's late, who's leaving, who's staying. Like and by the way, like Yasha said, lots of folks want to stay, right? It's just that the opportunity isn't clear. And so yeah, I mean, just thinking about that. So something I was reminded at Cargill how over and over again we would see people who were really successful in the company, especially earlier stage career, when they would get married and think about having a family or whatever. If back home their family was successful, right, or there was an opportunity to take over the family farm, they would drop Cargill in a heartbeat, right, and
Yeah,
go right back.
that's right.
Um, and I so it's on so on one hand it's a very like different type of environment, but the values seem largely the same, and so I think that's an interesting or a helpful place for me to be in terms of when I'm working with them on advising like the different types of things that I know about, right? Like, well, parts of it are incredibly different. Like some of the fundamental stuff is the same. It was right like Mark Tracy, who I haven't had on, but I've worked with on and off for a long time, also works at EarthAcre. He's on their board there, and Mark and I used to always get frustrated because we'd hear about how different everybody want to tell us how different their farmers are, right? Like, oh my farmers are different. Like I can tell you, I have now worked with farmers across whatever 40 countries or something. Like, sure, there's absolutely differences country to country, but at the end of the day, most of the problems are the exact same, right? They
Yeah.
structure a little bit differently, but like the core issues are the same. So it's always for me really helpful to have some of those reminders, and then seeing both the same problems but new environments is also uh, while I'm happy to help with them. Like I do get the things that I learned there end up getting applied other places. So
Yeah. No, that's also a super good point from the usual conversations that we're having are like, oh, indigenous point of view has this sort of additional knowledge, but and it's true in a lot of places, but you shouldn't also disregard local knowledge coming from the farmers communities that exactly that you're talking about. That same local knowledge is what helps them get the best out of the land and also understanding the ecosystem as well.
by the way, Ron, you should ask Yasha where he lives.
Yeah, that was my question. Where do you live, Yasha?
I'm in Chicago, Illinois,
Oh, okay. All right.
and I hear there are a lot of fellow Illinoisans.
That's right. You're from like, are you from Chicago then, or
No,
like?
no, my story takes me far and wide. I was born in Leningrad,
Okay.
and my family immigrated when I was 14 to DC, where I spent most of my time. I went to University of Maryland, College Park there, and then my wife and I moved to Chicago when she got a job here.
Yeah, you find yourself saying Chicago's beautiful this time of year, right? It's just
Chicago is lovely. I think most of the times of the year. I'm more of a cold person than a warm person. So
yeah,
so I don't mind the winters either.
yeah, cool.
Like emotionally, or
Both.
wow, wow, that was a hell of a pause there.
I don't mind going outside, I should say, right? Maybe I'm not the Wisconsinite that you'll find walking around in shorts in the middle of December,
Yeah.
But I think you can always put an extra layer and still be really comfortable.
So you mentioned Kenya, at least a good chunk of your work is done in Kenya.
Yeah.
Why Kenya? Like,
Uh,
yeah.
Yeah, so that's predominantly due to our really close connections to the indigenous communities there, right? So my co-founder Viraj, who I worked with previously at the my last company, Uptoro, um, is originally born in Kenya. He is Kenyan American. We also have Patita, who is a chairwoman of the Indigenous Women's Maasai Council for in Kenya, and then also our sister company, our ecotourism company, is in Kenya as well. So it really gave us a leg up of understanding and building products for and with the communities on the ground instead of just sort of coming in and being like, "Hey, we heard you have this problem and we have a magic solution."
Well,
Yeah,
in
right.
Kenya, also like from a infrastructure perspective, is one of the leaders, I would say, in that geography around creating markets, like trying to put structure around environmental credits and things like that. Um, 100%, it's the people there, but I think part of that is it's people, but also that environment is far more conducive than some of the other ones. In the it's just for starting something out, the hurdles are a little bit lower than say if you were trying to do something like in Central Africa or yeah. Um, so
True.
And
Absolutely.
when you mention stewardship, like that can mean a lot of things. Like, what's the goal? Is the goal like long-term viability, like monetary return on ground or, carbon type stuff or what's the goal there?
Great question. As with carbon, and we're learning quite a lot from carbon markets, right? A lot of folks are looking at concepts that would translate from a carbon market to biodiversity markets. Concepts like additionality, concepts like permanence, etc., right? Leakages, and on and on and on, right? Um, so from point of view of stewardship, the best way to I guess if you wanted a parallel, but I really dislike this parallel, would be to say, okay, this is kind of more of a red plus situation, right? It's kind of more of an avoidance situation.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't like that because there is a lot of active work, additional work that has to go in to keep the highly pristine ecosystems highly pristine, right? From point of view, not just from guarding from threats, which is what avoidance really is. Like there's a financial threat or another threat, right? But you're also looking at global threats that are impacting ecosystem change, right? So for example, we one of the things that we look at is we're looking at the speed of ecosystem degradation for each they call them ecoregions. That's like the grain that we're looking at. There's about 800 of them in the world. But what do we say for each ecosystem type, right? So we're looking at the speed of conversion plus degradation as climate changes and as some ecosystems thrives and some ecosystems thrive and some don't, right? So it's the work that goes into stewarding the ecosystem, keeping it to as close to pristine as possible or intact, although intactness is also there's a bunch to discuss there. But
Yeah.
but it's the keeping ecosystems for wildlife open for wildlife and wildlife movement, as well as having the ability to then not fully not go the national park route, like if you're familiar with that, right? Because
Mhm.
national park routes usually is like all humans are removed. This is now a national park. And we are seeing that even here in the United States, we're seeing that the outcomes there may also not be as good as on, again, like local community owned and local community managed ecosystems.
so so Yasha, you're CTO over at EarthAcre, right? And you're dealing with like uh, and I mean, we can talk about it in that community context, or if there's a different problem you want to talk. But I mean, I think you deal with a set of problems that are similar to problems we've dealt with in agriculture in terms of like, how do you reconcile a messy on the ground reality with a digital record, right? So forget not necessarily the land. Well, maybe it is the land ownership, but like, how do you approach that? So putting your tech hat on, like, how do you structure some of these incredibly unstructured problems and turn them into something that you can, you know, build a business with?
Great question. Uh,
You want us to come
uh,
back in 3 years? Would that be better?
I feel like it's partially a setup for me to just say AI will solve all my problems. All right. But of course, that's not what you're asking. Um, Complicated problems, as they say, have complicated solutions, right? And the way that I like to think about it is I like to think about what is the smallest chunk we can solve well that provides the most amount of value, right? So when we look at a really complex system, uh, right, like ecosystem, so nature, land ownership, community dynamics and like 20 other things, government, blah, 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 legislature, yada, yada, right? Uh, it's hard to represent for sure, right? Gabe, I'm not sure if you're more asking like my approach to the product development in these situations or not. But I would, if it's product development, then I think it's um, so far, it's really been traveling on the ground, sitting down and running design sprints workshops with communities themselves, with stakeholders, and trying to figure out what is the smallest chunk we can help provide the most value in, right? But by your expression, I'm getting that that was not the question. So,
Well, I'm more thinking about so I mean that product development approach I would say is pretty similar to most other product development approaches, right? Get as close to the problem as you can and yeah, figure out what the next thing is that you can do that's achievable that adds value, right? Like
yeah.
that people care about. I'm more thinking about I think like with so it's not looking for AI as the answer here, but like with your technologist hat on, right? Like I think so. Fair enough. Like, so I will share this. So at work at Little Leaf, I think I've talked about like there's a lot of room to grow there from a tech perspective. And so when I talk to people, like they're like, "Oh man, that sounds," I'm like, "Oh, it's going to look like this." And they're like, "Oh, that sounds great." I go, "Well, sure. You said there's a problem, and I basically said, why don't we fix that problem?" Like there wasn't anything. I haven't
Yeah.
really done anything yet, right? Until we execute. So I think when I'm asking that question, I'm asking, when you think about executing solutions. So Rodney is now an amateur terrible engineer,
That's right.
right?
The worst.
Well, actually, I shouldn't say now. He's always been a terrible software engineer.
For
He's
sure.
just he's able to go further
I've
than he
upped
ever
my
has.
game to a more terrifying terrible. So yeah.
The problems he's going to make are
Yeah.
but
Are we talking about vibe coding? Is that where this is? Okay, gotcha.
oh,
Yeah, yeah.
we should add, Rodney. What are you using for vibe coding these days? Are you still Grok, or have you moved over to Claude? Because I hear
So
that's the way
it's
to
funny.
go.
There was this big news this week that Grok released like 4.0 or 4.1 of their thing, and whatever. I'm sure it's much better at some things. It got crazy worse at programming. Like it caused me all kinds of problems with the new update. So I'm back to ChatGPT. I got a buddy, that Ben Brame, that was on here, a couple weeks ago. He is really pushing me towards Claude, and he was showing me how he uses it, and it was like just a different mental model than what I'm used to. So when he showed me that, I was like, okay, I got to give this a shot.
There's an engineer that I work with that's like a 25-year engineer. He runs, I think, 6 different models like at home. Like he's got they're gapped
I got a
for
couple.
Yeah.
unsurprising.
Yeah.
But so he's taking because the models are all open source, right? The core model. So So, and then he regularly tests all those updates against different problems, specifically around coding. So he tells me Claude's the best right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we implemented GitHub at work, and so like because we could get Claude in that,
Yeah.
that was part of the reason we were good with it. So sounds like Rodney.
Well, yeah, the statement that I'll continue to stand by is I'm certain Claude is the best for people that actually know how to write code, right? I
Okay.
think so. Ben convinced me the other day that it's worth trying it again, but I still am a little suspicious that it's going to be really great if I knew how to actually write code, you know. But they've changed all the interfaces on that. It's really intuitive. I mean, this was he showed me Claude, I think, directly embedded in, I think it was in VS Code,
Mhm.
and it was like a plugin, and he just plain English said, "This is what I want to do." And the magic of what Claude did there was it scanned his whole project through VS Code.
Yep.
So it could see these chains of, logic that, like, when I'm dumping 6 files into ChatGPT and saying this is what we need to do, it just can't see all the context. It remembers a little bit, but it also hallucinates. And
Rodney, have you heard of Cursor? Are you familiar with what that is?
that's another one. I think, yes, I have. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I feel like that would be the best solution to what
Yeah.
you're describing because A, it's all prepackaged for you. You don't have to worry about it. B, you can choose the model in Cursor. I think if you pay
Mm,
them, I think they might have sort of like bundled contracts with the big boys, and you
yeah.
can just like switch over, and it does all the things without the setup, etc. So that could be a really fun thing for you to try.
Yeah, I need to get on that for sure. I got a couple upgrades I want to make to the project, so it's time to experiment
Nice.
with something else.
Nice.
Yasha, we I'm sorry we didn't bring you in the earlier days of when Rodney was first building out. So Rodney, Rodney, why don't you tell him what you do? As opposed to me telling him what
Yeah,
you
so I run a cash grain consulting business for farmers. So I help them decide when to pull the trigger, when to set basis, when to roll, like stuff like that. Um, but I tried like crazy to just buy software to run my business.
Hmm.
And there's tons of software out there, and it's good. Like, I know these people that do this software. It's fantastic in a lot of ways. But every piece of software I found did about 80% of what I was trying to do, and high crossover. Everybody, I'm not doing anything that nobody else is doing. But I couldn't find one piece of software that did everything I needed to do to run my business the way I wanted. So Ben Brame introduced me to vibe coding, and it was off to the races after that. So I should say, I've had plenty of help from plenty of former colleagues that have, helped me when I'm tripping up here and there. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm using it for. So I'm building software, not commercial software. I'm never going to sell this software. It's just like for my own personal use.
Nice, man. That's cool. That's really interesting to see this software engineer becoming a lot more open to experts in their own fields, right? It's almost driving us into this direction of where we all of a sudden learned spreadsheets
Yeah.
many years ago, where we're
Yeah.
like, oh, this is our common language, and so this is really cool to see a really interesting dynamic that has been developing for the past couple of years.
Yeah, and I think, me and Gabe worked at Indigo together, and I've spent most of my time working with software engineers, some of the best software engineers in the world, I assume. But it
I don't
was
think you
really
and I ever worked together.
some of them, not all of them. But it was always hard to translate like the commercial things that I was trying to do in agriculture to the engineering side of things, right? It just seemed like we were never on the same language, and like, not to toot my own horn, I think I'm better at that part of it than most people. So I can't even imagine, like a super traditional grain guy trying to explain to a super traditional engineer what's going on. And the cool shift that I've seen here is now in plain English, I'm telling ChatGPT what I want. It knows the context. Like when I say the first time I typed fob values into ChatGPT and it spit back like, oh yeah, I see what you're trying to do here. You're trying to compare, blah blah blah. I was like, man, I've spent months trying to explain that to engineers, right? And it just knew the context. So what I love about it is in the end, the code's messy, it's dirty, it's ugly. But when I show the code to engineers that aren't ag people, they're like, oh yeah, this is terrible, by the way, but I get what you're trying to do and can fix it in a lot of cases.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So Yasha, what I was looking for with my question was understanding like when, like I said, with your technologist hat on. So, okay, you figured out like, okay, I need to keep track of how do we convert again this set of very messy ownership data. What I guess data is the right word. This very messy like scenario system of ownership. How do I systematically create something that represents that in an accurate, defensible way? Like, how do you? So you've decided that's the problem. Like, where do you go from a tech perspective, thinking about addressing like that stuff?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so you're asking me to solution, my favorite part of engineering. Hell yeah. I got you. Okay. Well, so again, I think there are multiple problems there, right? One of the most interesting ones that we're seeing right now is exactly that, right? There are some documents that already exist, possibly, right? Maybe they're PDFs, maybe they're most likely they're not PDFs. Most likely there's a piece of paper, right? Somewhere. And it's the standard product we would be developing maybe, what do we say, 8 years ago, with a very small team of one, two, three engineers, would be a data entry, take a photo, store a photo, create some fields that you want to extract, have people manually extract, right? Um, but in the last 2, 3 years, fairly simplistic tasks in data science that previously still kind of required a data scientist to set up, like your OCR, for example, right? The ability to sorry, yes, to the ability to scan a file into data, the
What
ability
does
to scan
OCR
a
stand for,
10.
Yasha?
That's a great question. I don't remember.
I think it's
Uh,
optical character recognition.
Thank you.
There we
There we
go.
go. I just know the sound it makes when it kills a man. But yeah, so things like that, things like um, how a lot of the AI trends right now are pointing at or like the new emerging AI trends are pointing to like even more accessible multimodal models that scan in images, understand context from images, scan in video, like things that we're prognosing to happen in 2026, right? Things that a couple of years ago we would probably have to hire for. Now, one of those solutions available to me, someone who's not that strong in data science, that's not the core of my skill set. I'm able to put that solution together in a fairly short amount of time. So that's one, right? Then there's obviously the data side of the nature monitoring itself, which is really fascinating because you have a lot of what's the industry term? Edge. You got a lot of IoT devices on the edge, and you're like, oh well, in the grand scheme of things, that's a solved problem, right? You can just send data directly to the servers from IoT devices, easy. And then you go, but there's not really even a cell service where we're putting these devices, right? So when we were looking at that, we were looking at creating a ways for communities to install data uploading stations, right? And some sort of central location with um, Raspberry Pis and some scripting that would allow them to plug in a SD card into an SD card reader and get it immediately uploaded to the cloud, push it through the pipelines, analyze, output analytics, whether it's camera traps, whether it's more interesting things like acoustics, and on and on and on. So those are kind of the things that are really that playing a big role in this business. We're also starting to look at telephony. I think in a lot of the communities that we work with, um, the technological penetration and even like the technological ability is not that high. So having an ability to call folks, play messages, record responses, analyze later. Again, talking about some multimodal AI, could be a really powerful tool where instead of what we used to do and what we did all three of us with many users over the course of our careers where we train the users how to use our systems, right? We now have an ability to have AI learn how to communicate with us, right? And those who have not gone through the understanding of what a button does, what a select in the what a drop down, what is a radio button, right? All of those things that we take for granted. Um, they no longer need to do that. They no longer need to learn it. We can come back to being understood.
Some Star Trek shit, man. Yeah. Computer make
That's
me
awesome.
tea,
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah. Um, so Yasha, I think we'd be I talked about how EarthAcre has a unique way of looking at biodiversity so because I guess Rodney, that's something we hear about with the farm structure where it's okay, you're growing one crop or you're growing three crops and rotate whatever, but like concerns around biodiversity and trying to figure out how do you actually represent or quantify that, and everybody's got a different answer. So I can't be clear enough in terms of asking people to quantify biodiversity. It is a nightmare conversation. Like people will even disagree with themselves as they're trying to explain to you like what's going on. Like, and everybody fully recognizes this really tough thing. So I will talk about it really, in the way that I understand it. And Yasha has a far deeper understanding. But EarthAcre's moved to this idea of biodiversity capacity. And so it's being able to measure an area of land, a square meter, a square kilometer, a square mile, and its ability to actually how much that biodiversity can it support. So the reason it's really helpful is I think to most people an intuitive relationship in terms of the idea that like the more plants there are, the more animals or things that you find on a piece of land, like that's probably correlated to its ability to hold more biodiversity, right? The more stuff that's there, the more stuff it can handle. Generally speaking, that's largely correlated to the amount of plants there and the difference in those plants. And so what they've been able to do is you can measure biodiversity capacity. So what's the ability for this piece of land, given its current state, how much biodiversity can it support? And so if you can figure out that, there's another intuitive leap. I think it's an intuitive leap that you need to make, which is, as we often see, if a piece of land has the capability of supporting life, life will generally fill the gaps, right? And so because measuring the different species or whatever creatures, whatever you want to say, whether it's microbe to elephant, like that's really, really hard. But understanding what you think it can support, if you look at that in a bunch of different places and start to understand, okay, this type of capacity can support this much biodiversity. Measuring the capacity is a lot easier than trying to identify every individual creature and like decide like how much of a creature do you need to count as like being biodiverse or any of those. You kind of get away from that negotiation.
And is that because there might be like 500 variables to what supports life, but there might be a billion types of life inside of that, right?
Yeah. I mean, so I don't know. And I'm sure the video. So I one of the things I did with EarthAcre, so they work with a lab, the Davies lab out of Harvard, and there's this guy that's like an expert in biodiversity capacity. So I was like talking to him, like interviewing him for a piece of media we were creating. He was talking about like it literally takes like no matter how whatever for any reasonable sized piece of land, which could literally just be like a square kilometer or something, the actual staff you would need to be able to confidently measure the number of different things that are there and identify them properly is in the hundreds of humans, like hundreds of humans, because you need experts in all kinds of different microbiomes, like whatever the different birds are, like, does this bird count as different from this bird? Like all that, plants, all that shit, like to actually do a full stack, depending on how deep down in the earth you want to go, like it's hundreds of people, hundreds of experts, right? Like you need to pull in. So again, so that's why like biodiversity as a thing is like incredibly expensive and basically overwhelming to try to go count. But again, biodiversity capacity, right? If we understand that measurement not a couple, but like we build a model understanding that, then you can go do that much in a far easier with a far lower lift. And it's like fairly accurate. Like it's not like making shit up. It's
Yeah.
scientifically sound. Like I said, I think it's intuitive to most folks, this idea that like, a lot of different plants or whatever it is you're measuring breeds the opportunity and that life finds a way. As we remember from Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
um, Yasha, I'm sure I butchered part of it there, but like that's you want to talk, you know, clean up whatever mess I made or flesh out any important bits of that.
No, not a mess. I think that's really great. The analogy that I like to use is the analogy like to explain ecological niches, right? Because that's what essentially we are measuring when we look at the plants, as Gabe says, right? So we're looking at the structure of the ecosystem. The analogy I like to use is housing analogy, right? Your studio holds upwards of two people, right? And it's probably one floor and it's probably fairly boxy. And then your townhouse can probably hold eight people, right? And then your apartment building can hold hundreds of people, and they're all sort of even from satellite we can tell the difference between those three residence types, right? And so in a very similar way, and obviously the the building can be populated or the building can be currently not populated, but it can hold it, right? And therefore, the habitat for those people exists. And in this fairly similar way, we can look at ecosystems and those ecosystem niches. And exactly as Gabe said, life finds a way. Absolutely, right? So being able to not need to count individual elephants because they won't stand still, but instead be able to say how many elephants can this particular ecosystem support. And again, we don't look at individual species, right? So I actually won't know how many elephants but we are going to be able to say that having observed different taxonomies, meaning we observe birds, we observe mammals, we observe amphibians, plants, right? We're then able to say with AI models that we put together based on both remote sensing and sort of the spot checks and individual ground observations, we're able to put together a very good predictive models that give us this answer at scale. What is the capacity of a particular ecosystem for biodiversity at scale? And the last thing I think that's important to mention is why is the scale so important? Don't we want to know more precisely, right? And we do. Absolutely, 100% we do. But when we look at when we come back to initial problem, right? The thing that we started with, where folks on the ground need to be able to make this a financially feasible endeavor, right? When we look at some of the more complicated biodiversity observation methods, right? For example, I really love this idea of eDNA, environmental DNA, going and sampling ground, water. There's some air sampling, right, where you just sample things, take it to the lab, you run a bunch of tests on it, and then from there you're like, okay, this looks like there's DNA of a hyena, DNA of this, DNA of that, so clearly they're in an ecosystem. Fantastic measurement, brilliant, really expensive, right? You're eating up like half of the value just on MRV alone, on DMRV alone, and all of a sudden it just doesn't make sense for folks to do this because it's just such an expensive part of this, right? So I think with biodiversity capacity, that is absolutely pioneered by Professor Andrew Davis. We're able to do that at scale at cost that is attainable for folks on the ground.
Well, and understandable. Like that's the other thing. Um, and so when I talk about intuitive, Rodney, like when I think about when we talk, when you look at including cover crops and things like that, and how that improves like ecosystem health more broadly, like
Yep.
on that land, right? It's the same thing, right? You're increasing the capacity of that acre to handle, a more diverse microbe infrastructure and things like that.
Yeah, and to be clear, what you described to us is the measurement of what that ground is able to do. But I assume the next stage of this, or what you're currently doing is saying, hey, what levers can I pull to increase that capacity on any unit, right? Like that's the
Yeah, so when they talk about restoring, right, it's increasing the
yeah,
capacity,
yeah,
and sustaining is maintaining.
yeah.
And then I mean the only other thing I'll say is like the incredible thing about Africa in particular, or the area they're working on in Kenya, like there are places where they've come in and the land is just shit. Like it's all the value's been extracted from the piece of ground. Like it's like Dust Bowl situation. And then with a surprisingly low effort level, like not no effort, but a surprisingly low effort level, and like not screwing things up. Like 3 years later, you never would have thought that that was like Dust Bowl situation. Like that's the other incredible thing when you think about like I there are plenty of, I would say, acres I've seen over the years where if you just leave them alone, like you might get some scrub brush on them over, if they've had a lot of and if nobody's touching them. But that's part of the reason it is that not only that indigenous communities' knowledge around how to maintain that land, but also the environment itself just lends itself really. It's a far easier lift than it is a lot of other places. It's not forced, I guess. Like it is a healthy place for that.
Yeah, I think it's really important to remember again with nature, right? Where life finds a way. Having healthy biodiversity sources, right? Means that you could bring back life. Obviously, I'm in no way, shape, or form advertising that, hey, let's destroy all this land because we can always just bring it back because that's not how anything works, right? Absolutely not. But we have seen incredible stories of restoration. One of the sites we work at. 25 years ago was in fact just completely barren, with barely any brush. And they set out to sort of rebuild this ecosystem. And the initial stages were obviously fairly low lift. Usually, the initial stages of restoration are fairly low lift. But then they were really driving towards getting this area to be highly biodiverse so they can bring ecotourism back. And so down to a point where the area that did not have elephants for the past 25 years, they laid out elephant dung trail, and elephants started coming back again. And given the fact that there was water available for them there, and there was food there and there was shade there, they would uh, come there and go back, and it just revitalizes the ecosystem.
You mentioned this Professor Davis. Is he the guy? I remember a guy like 10 or 15 years ago that was doing high intensity grazing on like the very edge of the Sahara Desert, trying to push that back. Is that this guy? It seems like
I don't know the professor. I think you're talking about the Great Green Wall. Is that what you're talking about?
maybe. I know he was I gave we've talked about this. He
Yeah,
was doing high
I
intensity.
don't think it's Professor Davies. Like
Yeah.
he is an expert in African grassland, and but like his focus is far more on that whole biodiversity aspect, and like I, I think he's a biologist by.
He's a remote sensing ecologist, right? So his strength is computational ecology from really interesting using really interesting instruments, right? So highly precise lidar. We're talking about the various frequencies of light in order to look at ecosystem as a whole and deriving relationships. And yeah, other digital observation methods.
Hmm.
Uh, Ronnie, should we talk about corn?
I have some product questions actually. So,
Oh,
are you building? Is this a platform that you're building, or yeah?
Yeah, so we're building a couple of things. Yeah. So as I alluded to in the beginning, we started with doing a couple of projects ourselves, right? Don't sell solutions to someone else where you haven't sold them for yourself, right? So we were fortunate enough to partner with a couple of incredible organizations on the ground, and started doing the biodiversity projects. And I think we also have a carbon project that we are helping on the community side, not an MRV side in any way, shape, or form. So let's make sure to set the record straight. But on the community side, to understand the community problems and to understand the nature problems, right?
Yep.
So with these couple of projects up and about, we're seeing the issues and the difficulties on the ground, and we started building a platform to help ourselves first, right? A set of tools, I would say. Why don't we call them set of tools first? And now we are at a platform, a level where we've got a platform that allows both project developers, project funders, community organizations, conservancies manage their projects in such a way that they can traceably show who owns what, who is getting paid for what, down to individual landowner for individual piece of land, and also what are the outcomes, right? Obviously, we're looking at nature outcomes, and now we're also looking to bring in additional outcomes depending on the type of project that's being run. Because I think that being able to layer incomes for folks on the ground, as long as the projects they're running are pro nature, right? As long as they're not planting monocultures, we want to be involved. We want to help them out. We want to build with them.
I was gonna say, so we don't. I don't think we have time to go deep on it, but we should think about having Yasha back to talk about the payments problem. Uh,
Would love to.
like, yeah. So I'm gonna put a pin in it because like I don't think I can't believe we haven't talked about pay. So sorry, Rodney, go back to your product questions.
Just one more question. So this money has to come from somewhere. So there's some investor that is, giving money, whether a government or whatever. And then your platform proves the outcomes of that investment. Like are you trying to prove like an ROI? Is that a big part of your product here?
I see. So I guess in another way, you're asking what is the outcomes? What is the outcomes
Yeah, I
piece of
guess.
this
Yeah, right.
that we're showing? Yeah. So um, let's start fairly simply, right? Like, why don't we start with carbon markets? Because I think that those problems are fairly well known, and we can talk about the emerging biodiversity markets, which are fascinating, and I would love to talk to you guys like
Mm.
specifically about biodiversity markets. But the carbon markets have a fairly well-defined set of issues, right? Um, so one of those, especially in community areas, is so-called free and prior informed consent. I don't know if you ever heard of that terminology, but basically the idea is that do folks on the ground know what they're signing up for?
Mm.
Are they signing up for it willingly and fully understanding how it's going to impact them? Do they know how much they're going to get paid? Do they know how the land use is going to change in order to et cetera, right? So and so there are a lot of protocols around that, just making sure that that's being done correctly.
Well,
Uh,
it's worth calling out if you read headlines about like projects failing for one reason or another or fraud. Oftentimes, where they have failed is this first step, which is this free prior informed consent thing, which was new to me too before starting to work with EarthAcre a little bit.
yeah.
And so it's not only making sure people really understand what they're signing up for, but like Yasha, back to the payments thing, it's also making sure you understand how those people are getting paid. And probably the most difficult thing is tracing use of funds. Not necessarily like, did this person buy a hamburger or a car with it, but like where the dollar actually went to.
Yeah.
Like it, so that process that EarthAcre's built uniquely, I think, solves both those issues, which is like it's super cool as you understand the problem. But sorry, just want to
No, no, no.
underscore that's where
Yeah.
things break down most of the time.
Yeah, so that's a big breakdown. And then separately, when we talk about, um, for example, pieces in the Guardian that come out about carbon projects, they could also come out about like, oh, you've planted a monoculture in a highly biodiverse area because let's say eucalyptus grows the fastest, right? So your nature-based solution to carbon is planting a singular tree that seems to grow the fastest, but also is negatively impacting everything around it, including the water table and on and on and on, right? And so the platform for just the carbon markets, right, de-risks all the projects that use it from both the community side, right, the payment side, and the nature side, right? There are a lot of different frameworks out there that give a premium for your carbon projects if it's at least nature neutral,
Sure.
right? And one of the ways to do that is again being able to track how the nature is impacted by it, not just saying that here's the in the part of, let's say, your methodology where you say what's your nature leakage. You just say, okay, we paid this guy to not herd his cattle on Wednesdays or something along those lines, right? So so it's de-risking all those things. And then going into nature markets, going into ecotourism markets, you're starting to look at the unique problems facing those markets and being able to also give them competitive users competitive advantage for the projects they're running, right? And we're currently exploring getting into additional markets with different type of companies and what kind of outcomes they're tracking. But this biodiversity capacity is a really good start at looking at, okay, your ecosystem is here. You started the project. How's the ecosystem evolving now that the project activities are happening?
Yeah.
So, Ronnie, you had asked where the money comes from ultimately, right? And so it's basically people that care about those things. So in some cases they're paying because paying EarthAcre or one of the partners they work with allows you to make a claim. Like in terms, so if you're a common thing that's coming up now is around data centers, right? So you're building this massive data center, like the carbon problem's well understood, but also oftentimes, you're building it in a rural area and you're disrupting some ecosystem as a result.
You
And
probably
so,
need cooling.
Yeah.
yeah, so
The
so so they
noise,
may
right?
buy
Noise
or
pollution
invest.
on that thing.
they
Ugh.
may they may invest in supporting biodiversity, like, and so it's the biodiversity piece of it is a unique difference from carbon. Is like, again, like an intuitive thing with carbon is like, okay, we're all sharing the same atmosphere, it's really straightforward. It is a harder leap for people to understand why would I pay for it in whether it's East Africa or Central America or something like that. And the reasons are that's where most of the biodiversity on Earth remains today. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of like putting your money where it has the biggest impact is why you would do that. So that's one set, is people looking for those offsets. I mean, the other is just like they have values around protecting environments and supporting biodiversity. And so whether or not they're actually using it to make a corporate claim, like it's putting money to work where their values are, and in a way that gives them confidence that, like, again, that traceability back to what's the dollar doing,
Yeah.
right? Like being able to see that and like, no, okay, that's the impact. There's also a whole nother thing where, because of all the tech that Yasha's built, like their cost ratio is so much lower for this. So
Yeah.
way more money goes to those people doing the work to sustain and restore those lands. And so it's just a far more effective use of the dollar. I'm not trying to shill for EarthAcre though. I don't know if we've got a lot of biodiversity credit or asset buyers listening to the podcast, but
It's a big market for us, but I will tell you, Yasha, you've done a much better job of explaining what your company does than Gabe ever has done to me over the last couple of years or whatever. So yeah,
Oh,
that's super exciting. I think
thanks.
super relevant today, and even the types of stuff you're doing absolutely ties back to what these farmers in Illinois are being proposed to and encouraged to do. A lot around the carbon markets, but it goes into more than that. The carbon discussion is such a murky discussion, right? Because it's like this very polarizing, like small sliver of what people are trying to do. And I see it specifically in the Midwest, man. Like it just hasn't been rolled out well. The the words they're using to describe, what you should and shouldn't do don't translate well. It's just been an interesting problem. So I appreciate you trying to tackle it. And I also, from experience, know that chunk of work that you described, like from sign up to payment and all the messy middle in between, that is a gigantic chunk of work trying to stay in house. So I applaud you for that.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah. I'll give some credit to AI.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
give some credit. I mean, I think a couple of years ago, I would have had to have a way larger team in order to accomplish what we accomplished with a much smaller team. But yeah, no, thank you so much. Yeah. And speaking of Illinois again, right? Like, sure, maybe we're not talking about biodiversity in Illinois just yet, although a quick shout out to tall grass prairies in Illinois. I think there's something like 9 acres of wild tall grass prairie left in all of Illinois.
Hmm.
An ecosystem that used to cover Illinois because a lot of the conversion happened in Illinois. So potentially there are like biodiversity restoration projects in key areas that are would be very interesting. But a very topical thing for us right now, exactly with AI, exactly with data centers, is like use of water, right? That conversation. I have some friends in various water facilities up and down the coast of Lake Michigan happening, both about the Michigan water, Lake Michigan water, and the aquifers and how quickly those are getting depleted. And damn sure that's impacting farmers, right? And I'm sure it's in the back of everyone's mind.
I
Yeah.
don't think they think about water much at all.
No, no, no. Yeah, of course not. Why would they?
Yeah, we always either have too much or not enough. On biodiversity in Illinois, I tell you this, in the last few years, I remember when I was a kid, grasshoppers were the most terrifying things in the world. They were everywhere, right? You would just be swarmed by grasshoppers. And then I think there was 20 years where I didn't see a single grasshopper. I don't know if that's true or not, but that feels true. And I have noticed in the last few years, like grasshoppers are a thing again. There's something to that. Yeah.
What about fireflies? They around? I feel like they went
A
away a
little
little
bit.
bit. Yeah.
But they've changed to LED fireflies, Gabe. We haven't talked about this.
More efficient. No, yeah, you didn't tell me.
Yes, they absolutely have changed to LED. It's the weirdest thing. Yeah, you asked. I want somebody. Our first comment on this podcast should be somebody either like arguing for or against the fact that they're now LED.
But like, this feels
I
like a birds aren't real thing.
That's amazing.
No, they changed. They like
I
it used
love that.
Fireflies used to be a yellow,
Yeah,
soft glow, right? It would come
yeah.
on and off really slow. And now they are bright white and they're very fast.
So you're thinking they're now 3K. They used to be about like 6K,
Exactly.
and now they've gotten
It's
to
a much.
3K, more like an operating theater situation.
Yes, I'm going to find the proof there. I know that to be true.
That's amazing. I love that. I absolutely love that. Uh, completely pointless plug. I'm not trying to plug anything, but there's this wonderful open source product that I've been like this project I've been following called Moth Box. Pardon my accent. MOTH box.
Okay.
As a dude posted on how to build your own. And basically, it's a box that using UV light attracts moths and other insects at night to land, and then takes pictures of them and does using AI identifies what landed on it. Super neat. So
Hmm.
so if you need some stuff
The
to
proof.
That's like
Yeah.
when
capture, yeah,
you're.
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
I just wish I had the data from 20 years ago, but
That's hey, that's true.
There's
That's
probably
true.
some video imagery you could find. Um,
yeah.
uh, okay.
But super also, sorry, I know corn needs to be discussed. The other thing that reminded me of, if you just give me just
Always.
one extra second, is there's a wonderful book that made a giant impact on me when I read it called Braiding Sweetgrass. And it's a bunch of essays all together. You can feel any which way about it, but it's got a lot of really interesting research. Like, for example, the United States Forest Service manages more roads lengthwise than the United States
Highway service.
Highway Administration,
Mhm.
right? So that's an interesting one. But one of the essays talks about how, and I think you will relate to this, when we were growing up, going on a road trip with your parents, right? Every gas station, you're cleaning off the windshield, right?
Yeah.
Every gas station, there's just insects everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And nowadays, right? And so that's a good indicator of sort of where the ecosystems are, and also ecosystems recovery. Not everything is doom and gloom. Where we work on this, ecosystems recover. But yeah, that reminded me of it.
Yeah, I just heard about that the other day, the lack of bugs. I'm interested in that. I do remember the Delta 88 that I drove around in 1986. The windshield was like straight up and down, so I'm not sure the aerodynamics are quite the same. But
Fair.
like, yeah, I believe it. It seems different for sure.
it's unusual for me to have to scrape bugs off. I
Yeah.
think I get more bugs inside the car, like that I end up smushing on the back,
Yeah.
on my side of the windshield than I see on the front. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Rodney.
Yeah.
I hadn't looked at corn until this morning.
Yeah.
So let's pull this up.
You can see that it's out to get me.
I can I see there's notes. Yeah, there's a lot of notes about specific market movement to piss off Rodney. Was this your bad day? Is this it right here?
No, the bad day is 2 days to the right.
Right
Uh,
here?
left one. Right
Here.
there. Right there. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So closed at 436.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And then has went down ever since. So
Okay. Okay.
just to like set the tone. December is a very popular month in corn futures, right? Like very popular. And the price has been garbage. Volatility's been pretty low. Options have been cheap. So I've had a lot of guys I work with that we bought December call options,
What
right?
strike? What strike did you own, Ron?
Well, so anywhere from essentially like from 410 to I mean we had some at 455, right?
Okay.
But like just laddered in between. So, we back in the middle of October we hit that low about 410 and like that was probably when we loaded up on most of those calls because we
Mm-hmm.
knew we had a corn crop, basis was pretty good, we're just flat it, buy calls to cover it. And then
Yeah.
look at that chart, man.
Yeah.
Everything was going our way. Like it was so good. And again, what I lost, so, like talk about a 410 when we hit that high up there at like 442 or whatever. Um, the charts were telling you there should have been some resistance at 440. We blew right through that. Next resistance was kind of 445. So we had some orders working at that 445 level and just never quite got there.
Yeah.
And again, Gabe, this is where I lost sight of the fact like it feels good to make money on calls.
You own futures. Yeah.
Essentially we own futures there.
Yeah.
Yes. I just didn't manage that the way I liked and I'm kicking
You should
myself.
call me next time you're gonna do some big options.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so Yasha, it's worth noting, like if you look at this picture, right, without context, like it kind of looks okay, right? There's this. So most people don't think about selling grain like without external prompting till you get to about here. So basically, they've planted a crop, like it looks like it's growing, like they'll start thinking about selling corn, and the market went down, down, down here, like, and this was a bad day. And then obviously there's this recovery. But Ronnie, what's break even for corn
I mean,
futures
most
right
guys are about 440
now? Okay.
probably.
So Yash, if you look at this, there was
Mhm.
about whatever that is, a solid 4 to 5 months where they're losing money because they were, you know, you would have
And
had to
that
known
4 to 5 months happened when they were thinking about marketing their
when they were
grain.
thinking about marketing. So
Yeah.
guys are selling, like absolutely selling all through here, or not doing anything and just like classic plan, which is just hope.
Yeah.
Which gave something back here, so got something all right. So other than Rodney's terrible understanding of options, which I think we
Yeah.
can own, like yeah, um, yeah. So
Any comments on why? Why was this so low for so long? Is this I'm understanding that it's not a
Yeah, no,
standard.
that's perfect. So, I mean, for sure, an oversupply issue on the corn market. We're going to carry out like 2.1 or 2.2 billion bushels
it
of
was the
corn.
largest corn crop ever, right?
It's the largest corn crop ever. So it's the biggest yield ever on
Yeah.
the biggest acres ever planted. The yield thing's still up for debate. I think we'll find out there. But so yeah, huge corn crop. D Actually, demand is off the charts as well. So the demand side is strong, but it's just leaning towards oversupply right now is the biggest problem.
Mhm.
And then what I'm telling my guys is, all right, the corn story on its own, whatever the corn story is actually a soybean story, right? So if you flip over to soybeans, soybeans are relatively tight stocks, so a completely different situation here. Relatively tight stocks if you believe China is going to buy any soybeans from the United States. If they disappear, it changes the game. So the balance sheet today assumes that China is buying some beans here. And, I don't know how much you follow Trump's tweets, Yasha, but around October, whatever 20th there, he started to talk about, hey, we're going to have a deal with China. They're going to buy beans. And the market got more and more confident. You see that gap in the chart. That
Yeah.
was a Sunday afternoon. Scott Bessent, I remember that Friday, going into that Friday, Scott Bessent was going to China or going somewhere to meet with the Chinese folks about tariffs. And on Sunday afternoon, he sent this tweet out that says, hey, China's agreed to buy 25 million metric tons of soybeans. And it was like, giddy up, man. That like drove the market crazy. So
Mhm.
since then, we peaked out here. This, if you overlaid the corn chart with this, the corn chart is definitely following this picture here. But we peaked out here. Uh, Oddly, the day before China started actually buying beans. So if you see this gap back a little bit, that was when Scott Bessent said, hey, we've reached a
Yeah. So
deal.
here's the
It's a
gap.
done deal,
Mhm.
right? Um,
And
as
then this is waiting for beans to move.
this is waiting for anything to happen. And literally every single one of these days, it was like, no sales, no sales, no sales, right? And government shutdown didn't help. But then about the peak was literally like, oh yeah, China came in and bought 10 million metric tons, which I thought the change from zero to anything was going to be gigantic, right?
Mhm.
Like just like breaking the seal. And it's like a typical buy the rumor, sell the fact thing, I think, right? It did the complete opposite.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, one thing, Gabe, have you been following this China story at all or
I mean, a
much?
little bit.
Yeah.
What's on your mind?
Well, so just, I've been trying to think of like why are beans down when we're suddenly actually selling grain to China. So, there was a time when the US was super competitive, more competitive versus Brazil for China, right? And it was in the heat of negotiation. So it was like China for sure was making financial decisions that were bad for them to win this tariff battle, right? That was like,
Josh, just to be clear, they were buying beans at a more expensive price from South America than they could have gotten them from the U.S., even with tariffs going.
Mhm.
exactly.
Mhm.
And it was just to, well, we think it was to,
It's
for
politically
negotiation.
motivated, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I've had some folks here recently tell me, well, yeah, but that they may have bought futures on the board, right? Just bought futures and gained that length. And then as they're converting that to cash sales, they'd be offsetting those hedges, right? And could put some hedge pressure on. So I don't know if that's the deal, but it feels very real.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I like it. Also, I think part of it is just when you send out a headline about they're buying 25 million, tons, and then they don't do anything for 3 weeks, and then buy 10 million, like that. Like that's what I think is ultimately driving the biggest change here. It's not
Yeah, right.
them taking bean contracts to delivery or something.
Yeah. Also, I misspoke. They bought like 1 million metric tons
Okay.
of, yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I mean, I would say as is classic, maybe they agreed to buy 25 million, but did not agree to any particular timeline. Right? Here's how
Well,
they
there's
did.
and they've thrown out a few timelines. Supposedly it's 12 million by the end of this calendar year. But they also like, does that include last crop year,
Right.
right? This calendar year.
Yeah.
So there's lots of games being played here for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Um,
the moral of the story here is options remain super cheap. Volatility is still so low right now. But for the most part, it's been appropriately priced, right? We've been buying tons of cheap calls or tons of cheap puts and essentially not making any money on those. We did have some guys, we had some bean calls bought and we were able to roll those up. It was a big enough move that it was like, hey, roll those up and capture it. So feeling good there, but man, those corn options, they're driving me nuts.
okay. Okay. Sorry, man. Like but it is tough. Well, and especially when you get close to expiration, that delta changes a lot faster.
Yeah, one more thing I'd say is I am trying to take this portfolio approach, right?
Yep.
So, and you know this, Gabe. The problem is like I'm not thinking about the portfolio today. I'm mad about this very one specific trade that's expired today. So I'm like, whatever.
Well, I was talking to Mark Tracy yesterday about so we used to have this product called Cargill called Pacer Target, and so it would deliver you. it had a floor price, right? So you sell below here and it had a max price. And and then you got the average. And if it was between those, you got the average. If it was below the floor, you got the floor. Above the cap, you got the cap or target marketing,
Yep.
right? And so I still get mad at myself because nobody really used it. And then there was something happened in the market and it got a little more adoption than it would have normally. Like the pricing and the market situation made more sense. And so people have come up. So we used to let people reprice those positions. And so basically they'd get whatever so we had a bunch of products that worked like that, where there was a floor and then some average. Um, but the way the pacer target works is its components, it's basically a call spread, right? To simplify it a little bit. So as you know, like that top end call starts to gather a lot more value, it starts to really throw you off when you get close to that top strike. Yeah. And so when I had learned how to do it, which was, 6 years before this event, before people like were really doing it, like we would treat it like everything else. But what we should have done is we had to include what they had to pay to get out of the top end of that call, right? And reduce the average by that price if they were getting out in the middle of it. And like, I just bring that as like, I still get so pissed at myself for not realizing that we were doing that wrong. Like it was like, so yeah, I mean, and it was like a trivial part of the portfolio.
Yeah,
like
exactly. This is the thing you remember.
Complete non-event. I didn't get in trouble for it, right? Like my boss, Jeff Seeley, who was great at like, people made errors. He set a really good example. He didn't like scream at me or anything, right? But man, I was just like, oh, I was so embarrassed. Like, it was just like, I can't believe I didn't even think about this. Like, I just, so I think about that regularly. Some screw up from 10 years ago that maybe cost, 200 grand or something. Like, it was like, in terms of just an idiot. So anyway.
Hey, one more addition to that. So with this bean market rallying like this, we're starting to look at new crop sales, and it's just a wild card on if we should be selling or not. So I looked at some min maxes, and I was talking to Dean Durden about it, who's been on the podcast, and he said it the greatest way. I was like, man, I like the min max because I like the prices that it's at, but my concern is we get up that top level and like I just can't get out of it, right? There's nothing I can do. And he said it best. He's like, dude, a min max is like trying to land a 747 on an aircraft carrier, right? Like the odds of that coming in exactly where you want it are essentially zero. So ultimately we decided not to do it, but check the hog or the beef market lately.
So I've got Feb futures up here, and so I finally don't look like a moron.
No.
So Yasha, this is a weekly chart. So it goes back a little bit further, but basically starting here, we had Nate Bravitz on who talked about. So Nate's a guy, another ag guy. He runs a small cow calf operation in addition to all the 80 other things he does. But he was sharing kind of like sentiment in that market, in that industry around even at this point, the market, the front month at that time was basically about double what it normally is. So he kind of pushed me on it, was like, hey, it feels really overbought, or it feels very much like equities did in 2007, and grain markets for that matter. And so Nate, we worked together at that time. So that really jumps out at me. He's not a real sensational guy, right? He's not given to hyperbole. Yeah. And so when he said that, like, I was like, all right, let me take a look at this a little bit more. I was like, oh, man, like, yeah, it has a lot of those. This particular has a lot of those symptoms. And then we were looking at kind of the more macro stuff around what the government buyouts, where they were letting people, basically deferred layoff stuff, right? They were going to get paid for the next 6 months. I think there were some other things we were looking at, and it's like, all right, it feels like September, the bottom could fall out on this, like, and it would be really problematic if it did. So like Rodney said, demand's at all-time high on corn. This is part of the reason. It's just a lot of the corn, almost half of it goes to animal feed. And beef is man, if people listen to this podcast, they probably heard me say this about 1,000 times. Beef is a premium protein. So people, if you've got excess cash, like you buy beef, otherwise then you go pork and chicken. Um, and um, and so it's an interesting indicator of consumer wealth. And so Rodney often asks people, I'm surprised he didn't ask you, Yasha, like, do you, right, I guess this is normally when it comes up. Like
Yeah, exactly.
when's the last time, Yasha, I don't know. Do you have any dietary restrictions? Do you eat steak? No.
I eat everything, yeah.
You eat everything.
But I think red meat I eat less frequently. Yeah, I think I'm more of a chicken guy.
That
So when was the last
frugal
time you had a
spender.
steak?
Not a frugal spender. It's more of both dietary kind of concerns about as I get older, there are a bunch of things talking about red meat, blah blah. So maybe like once a week, maybe even once every 2 weeks. But and then there's also the water cost and all the other costs of beef raising itself. That sort of play in the back of my mind. I am, after all, a CTO of EarthAcre, a sustainability company. So I embody a lot of the values.
Um, yeah. So the oftentimes you get is people go, oh yeah, we just bought it, and then Rodney will ask them like what they paid, and like, oh yeah, it was super expensive, like it was way more than I thought. It's like, and but what that tells you, so it's a premium purchase, and people basically once they decide to buy it, they don't really think about the price doesn't affect their decision most of the time, but then you hit a point where it does, right? And so it seems like we kind of hit that around here. But what actually drove the market down was Trump opening up imports from Argentina. Like, you never know what the hell it's going to be that drives it, like that makes the market kind of flip. So yeah. So I was off by, you know, whatever, 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But I feel pretty good about that in terms of like understanding the timing. And if you look at and so we were looking at this as a leading indicator for more macroeconomic thing. So if you go look now today at whatever, I think it's like the greed fear indicator on CNBC. My neighbor was showing me yesterday. It's like 3 out of 100, meaning all the way on the fear side.
Really?
Yeah, sentiment's like really bad. I mean, you got this on it. It's interesting the spin on the employment data coming out, right? Like, I mean, it's
I was going to ask you
absolutely,
about that. Yeah.
yeah. I think it's better than expected. So it's like, so what? I think if it would come out bad, like we would have again. Like, just feels like we're spinning a bunch of plates. I
Okay.
you know, uh, so I'll continue to say if the markets hold through whatever I said, Jan, Feb, like it feels like they'll probably make it through whatever the heck's going on right now.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, the I can't remember if I talked about this before. Somebody did a bunch of research on major technological like productivity enhancements and how that impacts employment numbers. And so what you find, so the layoffs we're seeing actually have nothing to do with AI. AI is like the air cover for it. It's just companies like shedding weight for whatever reason.
Sure.
Like they always do, right? Like
Yeah.
companies go through layoffs, like it's a pretty
Right.
normal thing. But what happens is when there are large productivity gains through a technological enhancement, um, when there's a a recession or a down, whatever you want to call it, right? Like even if it's not recession, but or depression, right? It's just a hard move down. You'll see companies do all those layoffs to tighten things up, and then the actual problem is the jobs don't recover on the other side. So like that's when we'll actually see layoffs because of the productivity enhancements that people are getting out of AI. Now, one other thing, and this is so I've also said I feel like AI is in a bubble. Like I was saying this like about
Yeah.
2 months ago. I was like, I feel like it's like a March, that's like a March April thing.
Sure.
Um, and so I saw somebody articulate it way better, which is we're in an LLM bubble, not an AI bubble. So like AI has and continues to demonstrate fundamental value in more traditional AI stuff. It's so your more quant driven stuff, your ML driven things that aren't like this LLM
Yeah.
hype train, right? That's but so that stuff is still solid and will take up a lot of CPU processing and everything else.
Right.
But at the same time, like those it's that LLM piece that's still hasn't really moved over the line in terms of being able to actually get out of the hallucinations and like in the way they're trained, it seems like that's unlikely to actually happen.
Mm.
Uh, so really good at more qualitative stuff, understanding sentiment of things, doing desk research more efficiently. Like it does a lot of those things better, but until somebody adds that additional layer that kind of self checks for hallucinations, right? Which is actually probably an ML problem, not a problem you're going to solve with an LLM.
Yeah. Right.
You're yeah. Um, so there's a lot. But anyway, like on one hand,
That's a
you know,
bold prediction, Gabe.
yeah,
Hey, this is a good time to remind everyone we're not giving futures
we're not
trading advice
we're not
here.
giving trading advice.
Do not take any of this for anything
Yeah,
more than
nobody go trade off what I said. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, but Yasha, to be clear, this was a bold prediction too at the time, right? Like,
yeah.
and I'll I will also tell you the fundamental story here doesn't actually like other than the Argentine imports coming in, like herds continue to drop, drought's still a major problem.
Yeah.
Like the fundamental structure of this market should still be putting a bullish picture, right?
100%. I was going to add that, Gabe. The Argentina story is like minuscule compared to the whole thing.
Because we're talking
Fundamentals
about like
really have
40.
not changed here. What's that?
How large is the Argentina addition to this market?
So I think it's like 1%
Yeah.
Yeah,
of
it's
is the impact here. It's
Yeah.
like nothing, right?
Yeah.
but that
Fundamentals have not changed. The only thing that's really changed here is sentiment and, posts on Twitter and True Social.
Yeah.
right. And so those bold predictions are really like, you know, having grown up professionally in Cargill, like there's a huge focus there on market fundamentals, fundamental structures, um, like core supply demand stuff, which, you know, don't explain everything, but help give, I think, a strong anchor for like when we think about reversion to means and things like that, you know, markets normally go back to whatever the mean is, but those S&Ds tell us how that mean shifts and like what is reasonable from a price perspective. And that's when I'm saying those things, like you're getting, I would say, a large, you know, an amateur but informed amateur view on like what I think that fundamental picture supports. Um, and what feels like overblown, like what's hype versus like
Yeah.
real.
No, I understand where you're coming from. I do think that well, rather, I think that I have a different take on the AI bubble. How about that? Right? Like beef. I got absolutely nothing to
What's the
argue
take on
here.
the AI side,
Yeah,
Asher?
we got
Tell
to hear that.
us. Yeah.
Um, I think so 100% agree on the jobs, by the way. Like couldn't agree anymore on the jobs. That's the I was like if the jobs come up, I was honestly probably going to say the same line if we were going to discuss it. It's all on the recovery. It's not in the usual
Mm.
Q4, Q1 shedding in the large companies, right? It's really about how they plan and how the internal processes work. 100% agree. Um, but I think on AI, it's very interesting. What's very interesting for me is or LLM. I like that actually. LLM bubble versus AI bubble. I love the more tight definitions. I'm an engineer by trade, so I do want to be get as granular as possible in my definitions. I think there is a lot of room in LLM right now to grow. I think both on the software side, I think like the last year we've seen some incredible improvements. Like I was fortunate enough to get on the very, very early first ChatGPT model when they were in beta because I knew someone inside and they were like, here, check this out. And I was like, this is magic. This is nothing short of magic, right? And then this past year, like I'm hearing you talk about hallucinations, and I remember those hallucinations that I was dealing with, like in the very beginning. I was like, this is magic, but also this Markov chain slightly modified. But and now the my like my team's development speed is so much
Yeah.
like right. I'm not dealing with hallucinations. How about that? I'm dealing with context. And where I was leading this to is that I think the LLM bubble is not yet, if we want to call it a bubble, which I think it is, it's not yet there. It's not yet peaked.
Yeah, I
That
told you, March.
I don't think March.
Ah,
I don't think March.
I,
I think there's a financial argument to make, right? Like sort of if we think back to like all of the other sponsored behaviors that we have to be really worried about as consumers, where like well, you remember when like Uber was super cheap and we're like, oh my God, great.
well,
And
this is the enshittification problem, right?
exactly, exactly, right. And that's sort of like when you want to make a PR statement right now, you say, "Oh, I don't need junior engineers. I just do everything agentically, and everything's great and fantastic and blah blah." Right? I think that's a horrible misnomer to think about. I think there's quite a bit multimodal stuff coming that's going to continue pushing this market. And I think that it will be interesting to see when the sponsorship for those model trainings that are in billions of dollars gets switched to consumer side when we get to run that cost and then see what happens with the market then.
Yeah, I mean, well, so for what it's worth, Yasha, like I'm now actively using a couple different things to because I'm pushing on them for work related problems, and like they really struggle with like, using hard numbers. Like it just, I mean, there was something where I was like, oh, help me figure out a piece of equipment, and this is the maximum height on that equipment. And then it gave me, I was like, give me what you think the three best answers are given these criteria. And it gave me those answers. And I was like, and then so then I started digging into them because that's what I'm doing, right? Like I'm testing out the performance. And I was like, and I looked at something, I was like, oh, there's like a better model of this. I told you budget wasn't a constraint. There's a better model of what you're talking about that still fits within my criteria. Why didn't you use that one? And it was like, oh, because the height constraint was, I thought it was better to be conservative on height. It was like, well, you say that, but the other two things you showed me are higher than this one. So what, what's going? It's like, yeah, I don't know. Like, and it's like, okay, great. Like, so, and
Have you
that
checked? Sorry, immediate debugging session, like engineering mind turned on immediately. Have you checked when what was the cutoff date for the training data set that the LLM was trained on versus the
I did not.
newest version? Okay.
So that was using, I was using Perplexity,
Hmm.
and it was using I did it actually both with the labs feature and the research feature. And both of them were found. Like I don't, yeah. And then I went and did it in Copilot, which was using GPT-5, and that was also had a similar issue. Like, I didn't have the same conversation, but it was a similar set of problems. Um, and so I've just activated Claude in Copilot, and I think I'm using out what is it, Opus there. Um, I think
Deep
it's
research tool or whatever.
yeah, like but again, like I'm just it because for where I'm at, like there's definitely a value of being able to give people a natural language way to ask questions that are really, that get at asking what should really be ML AI, more traditional ML AI driven um, tools, like and be able to give. And so I think for us, and I'm not the only place, but like for this more technical stuff, it's figuring out can we use it to bridge the gap. Was it like an MPC server, like to use an MPC in between to use that natural language query to figure out what set of more quant trained AI tooling that I've got, um, and figure out how to do that. But I mean, that feels like a problem that's like, like in terms of me solving it for what we're doing, given like where we're at, like that's a couple years away from having something that's feasible.
Mhm.
And I'm dealing with a number of other challenges in terms of getting. It's like even if you gave me that LLM NPC combo that worked today, like I still probably wouldn't be in a place to make it work. But like that's what we're starting to poke on because I keep every 3 months everybody's like, oh, you really got to check them out again. Like, is it better than it was? Yeah, it's better than it was. Does it do what I need? No, because I need it to be right, and it's still not right.
It's difficult to have non-deterministic systems be right all the time, right?
Yeah, it is. Like that's where this breaks down, right? And like so, like I said, for more qualitative stuff, I do believe and agree it's super useful. And I use it all the time now for like desk research to like, hey, I need to find an alternative to WhatsApp that works with enterprises. Like ask me a bunch of questions to help you figure out what I should be doing, right? And then like, okay, great. Now we've got a framework to do analysis. All right, now let me go double check like why you told me these were good. Like, but at the
Right.
same time, the frameworks that it gave are super helpful, right? But I still have to go in and check, which is fine. Like that's, but they have absolutely cut down the amount of work to get to that point, right?
Yeah.
It's like I asked an intern to do it, which is fine. Like a good intern, not a shitty intern that was like
Right.
somebody's nephew or something.
Yeah.
Um,
It's funny.
so
I tell you, my favorite use of not one of my favorite uses of artificial intelligence today is I have to record all my phone calls with customers because of my brokerage business. And
mm,
it when I'm done with the call, it recaps the call, sends me a note on the call, and tells me, "Hey, Gabe agreed to this, Rodney agreed to this." Like it's, I could see a world where I convert that into like to-dos, right, or some kind of
mhm.
task. But this is my favorite one ever that I got. I called a customer of mine and he was in a bad spot and we couldn't, there was a bad connection. So the recap made me laugh. As a recap, Rodney initiated the call to confirm if Ryan could hear him clearly. And then it says, Rodney asked if Ryan was present on the call, indicating a need for confirmation of the connection. And that was it. It was great.
That's a
The
good
AI version
recap.
of "Can you hear me now?" Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That was good. All right,
Uh,
man.
all
Mm.
right. So people interested in Yasha and his work can go to earthacre.com. I'm, if any of what we talked about is interesting, I strongly recommend it. The work there is really cool. It's not just cool; it's super valuable, and like I said, a really unique way of addressing those problems. And we'll bring Yasha back at some point to talk about the specifics of payment challenges for unbanked folks. Like that,
Yeah.
it's a whole different ballgame. Uh,
That's definitely interesting. Yeah.
Yasha, any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts are, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Lovely to hang out, lovely to learn from you. One of the biggest reasons I love being in startups is because I get to learn so much from so many people. And I didn't know when I woke up today I'd be learning about beef futures, but here we are, and that was fascinating. No, 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 I that was not a dig on it. That was not sarcasm. That was fascinating. Thank you so much. Um, other than that, yeah, let's keep an eye on what's going on with the bubble, so to speak. I think that's the for every technologist out there right now. I think coming into 2026, every leader even I would say, right, keeping an eye on even the tooling that's emerging, right? Now let's say LLMs slow down, but the tooling is not going to slow down, and there'll be different context put in place over top of the tooling, and fine-tuned tools that produce diagrams and podcasts and et cetera, et cetera. You guys, you've seen the notebook LM by Google, right? That you can shove a PDF in and it will produce a podcast. Um, Again, magic. I just first time I used it, I was just like, this is black sorcery. I mean, it was like just not normal. So yeah, it'd be really interesting to keep an eye and continue to learn. I think there's a lot of learning for us in the next 5, 10 years in and around what this technology actually means and actually ends up being.
Yeah. I'm gonna also do a quick plug for my new website, ledlightningbugs.com. It's not up yet. I'm gonna secure that
You
when
bought
this
the
is
URL
over.
right now, yeah.
I feel like if you remember that Owl City song, the
Mm,
10,000 the Fireflies
the-
Oh
song,
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
think you should license that from them and see.
All right.
I
Yeah,
usually think that everyone loves hearing the first 5 seconds of a song when you join when you see it when you just like get on the website.
every
It's my
time. Yeah,
favorite part of the MySpace
for sure.
experience.
For sure. Well, good chatting with you guys. Good to see you.
Thanks for coming
Good
on,
chatting,
Yasha.
Yasha.
pleasure
Good to see you,
meeting you.
Rodney.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Bye.
See you.